Another day, another dollar. Another day, another dollar. Another day, another list video. Another day, another ramble. If you guys like these rambles, leave a like, leave a comment. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. You get content all the time from yours truly. And today we're getting into, so far this week, we've done my 5 favorite moves of the offseason. We've done my 5 least favorite moves of the offseason. And today we're doing 5 underrated moves of the offseason. We're going to nerd out a little bit here. Somewhere under the radar. I really try to go for underrated. Now I have a stance that there's really no such thing as underrated anymore or overrated really in the social media era because everything gets discussed. So for example, I thought about including Jake LaRavia on this list, right? The new signing for the Lakers, because I don't love that they lost Dorian Finney-Smith, and I do think Dorian Finney-Smith is better at what they need than Jake LaRavia in a lot of ways, but you get significantly younger and cheaper with what is Dorian's hypothetical replacement. I do think there's some value there. The only thing is I can't call it underrated because I saw it talked about the fucking death. Can't believe how much Jake LaRavia's move got talked about. So it's not in here, but I thought about it. As you can see, underrated. Now, what we've been doing, I replaced the E's with 3s a couple days ago. I replaced the S with dollar signs yesterday. I'm replacing the A with a 4. Let me know what you guys think about that. Seriously, though. Let's get right into it. Move number 1. Well, you know, I gotta include the Mavericks in here at some point, right? I got to include Nico. Let Nico cook. I got to include him in here at some point. The Daniel Gaffford extension, I think, sort of has gone under the radar. This was a guy who I'm not going to lie to you. I thought 100% Daniel Gaffford is going to get traded at the end of this, by the end of the offseason. If you were to tell me, hey, going into the next season, not only is Daniel Gaffford still on the team, but he signed an extension. That would have really shocked me. And I really liked the value that it was at. I thought for sure Gaffford was a guy who was going to get over $20 million a year. And his contract that he signed puts him around $18 million a year annually for the next 3. I think that's fantastic, right? Like in a couple of years, he'll be not even the 20th highest paid center in the NBA. And I definitely think he's probably a league average center? Probably, I say league average, but he's probably around the 15th best center in the league, something along those lines, depending on who you classify as a center and who you don't. So I really do like this for the Mavs because not only do you lock them up, you don't have to worry about unrestricted free agency down the line, but it's a very tradable contract. And there are teams out there that would gladly line up to go after this guy, especially a guy who's under contract, to be their starting center. We've seen him do it with the Mavs. I wanted to point out this 12-game stretch he had in the month of January when Derek Lively was out with an injury, Luka Doncic was out with an injury, and Kyrie missed time. So Gaffford out there sometimes with Spencer Dinwiddie as a starting point guard was averaging nearly 30 minutes a game, 16 points a game, 10.5 rebounds, 3.5 blocks per game. In fact, up until Daniel Gaffford got injured with his knee injury, and this is kind of why this is a little alarming because he's just not somebody I think who can realistically play 30 minutes per game on a regular basis. But until he got injured, he was second in the league in total blocks behind Victor Wembanyama. So Gaffford had a really strong season, and he was 70% from the field over that time. I just wanted to point out that stretch because, again, no Derek Lively, so Gafford's the main guy, but also no Luka. So it's not like he was getting spoon-fed lobs over and over and over, and he is one of the better pick-and-roll men in the entire NBA. Fantastic offensive rebounder. A little underwhelming as a defensive rebounder. Good shot blocker. Good rim protector. And just strong as hell and fun and exciting. Right? He's one of those guys when he dunks, yeah! One of those guys. You always want to have one of those guys on your team. And $18 million a year, I think, is really solid value for a guy like this. And again, I hate to bring this up, but it's just when you look at the Mavs roster, it's probably the direction this is going to go in at some point. But it's so tradable. I mean, it is so tradable, right? So I do love this move for the Mavericks. It was not a move I was expecting, and I do think it's flown under the radar a tiny bit. Next up, speaking of Mavericks, how about a former Mavs legend, maybe a future Mavs legend who might get their jersey retired someday. You never know. Oh, wait, not Trenton Watford. Not Trenton Watford. Who knows? Maybe Trenton Watford's a former Mav. But Trenton Watford, I like this move for Philly, right? I told you were going to nerd out a tiny bit here. Getting a guy like this, I don't know what it is, $2.5 million or whatever he signed for is really, really solid value. Watford's one of those interesting players that's kind of difficult to assess because he did this in Portland, then Portland kind of just cut bait with him, and then he did it last year with Brooklyn where March comes around, he's on these terrible teams, and guys start getting shut down. The bigger players, he's out. He rolled his ankle. We're just going to shut him down the rest of the season. And then random guys start to get the ball more. And Trenton Watford's one of these guys where he starts to get the ball more in March, and the numbers are pretty impressive, and the things that he's capable of doing are pretty impressive, but they're on shitty-ass teams. It's the end of the season, so you don't know what to make of it. But I do like Trenton Watford's game quite a bit at the forward spot. Being able to put the ball on the floor, being able to create and play make is pretty special, I would say. Like he's got some pretty special playmaking chops for a forward. And I do think in this Sixers makeup, in their roster makeup, I think this is something they desperately needed, especially with Yabusele leaving in free agency. Replacing him cheaper, Yabusele's making $6 million, so it's not like he would have broke the bank. But when you're like needing every single penny possible in an effort to bring back Quentin Grimes, going from Yabusele to Watford is pretty interesting to me, right? Because they're kind of similar in some ways. So I do like this addition for them. And I even see scenarios where, I don't know, he could start for them. I could Justin Edwards, like there's a couple other directions they could go, but I look at that 4 spot for them. I don't really know who it's going to be, and imagining they're healthy, right? Or as healthy as they could possibly be. Like Paul George as your 4, or are you going to slide Paul George to the 3 and then give somebody like Watford an opportunity to play? Jabari Walker is also somebody that Sixers fans are pretty excited about, former Blazer as well. But Watford to me is pretty interesting because he does have the juice offensively and the creation ability for others. That is really interesting to me. And so if you are healthy and you're running out lineups that are like Maxey, McCain, Paul George, Watford, and Embiid, those are really good offensive lineups, man, with a lot of playmaking, right? A lot of playmaking. Defensively, I'm not entirely sure about that lineup, but a lot of playmaking, 1 through 5 there. So I do like this pickup for him. I think it's underrated. I think it's under the radar, and it'll be interesting. He's only 23 years old, 24 years old, still a young guy. It'll be really interesting to see what he looks like on a better team, assuming he does get a good amount of playing time, right? I'd be very interested to see how that sort of translates for him. Next up, oh my God, I thought we were getting to who I hinted at, teased at earlier. But speak of the Sixers, Yabusele. I'm a little bit surprised how far under the radar this signing went. Gershon Yabusele obviously signing with the New York Knicks, $6 million a year, I believe, very cheap. This one, I'm kind of surprised it's just not talked about at all because last offseason, after the Olympics, Yabusele's free agency was pretty well talked about, right? It was kind of this interesting, where's Yabusele going to go? And then he goes to the Sixers, and the Sixers were absolutely atrocious, but Yabusele was pretty good. And then his free agency comes and goes. He goes to the Knicks, one of the more high-profile teams in the league, and I still see nobody talking about it. Maybe I'm just not looking in the right places, but I love this pickup. I love it. I mean, I was going through all these moves, trying to figure out what moves I like, and I got to this one, and honestly, I forgot about it. I forgot about the Knicks offseason in general, getting Jordan Clarkson and Yabusele for basically nothing. And I thought to myself, damn, that's a really, really nice get. Because immediately I'm envisioning lineups where you're basically replacing Josh Hart with Yabusele. So you got Brunson, Mikal, OG, Yabusele, and Cat. That's a starting 5. All 5 guys can shoot the basketball. All 5 guys have some juice offensively to create stuff for themselves off the dribble. All 5 guys are okay to good to great playmakers. That's disgusting offensively. And I don't think that's terrible defensively. I think a lot of Yabusele's defensive stuff last year, just from, admittedly, I didn't watch a ton of Sixers games, especially once it got bad. I checked in every now and then to see what Quentin Grimes was up to after that trade. But defensively, I think a lot of the disappointment you could have had in Yabusele's defensive game, not that you expected him to be great or anything with his size, was the fact that he was playing small ball 5 so often with Philly, and that's just not really his game. But it's something he can go to, though, which, again, is a reason why I like this for the Knicks, is because it gives you that versatility a little bit. You could go Yabusele small ball 5 if you wanted to, right? But imagining him playing alongside Cat or Mitchell Robinson or Huck Porty even, is pretty interesting to me. So I do like this quite a bit. Obviously, I think he'll come off the bench, but I do think there are situations where he could close games. And you have this like really big lineup on the floor who could all shoot the 3 ball. I mean, we saw how painful it was to have just one guy for the Knicks who couldn't shoot threes in the line, and Josh Hart. How devastating that could be at times. When you go deeper, the deeper and deeper you go in the playoffs, the more just that one weakness can come back to bite you in the ass in such a major way. And this could be an interesting sort of, would I be all that surprised if it's the second round of the playoffs next year and like Yabusele's getting really big time closing minutes and is making shit happen? No, I wouldn't be that surprised at all. We're looking back and I'm like, damn, that was such a nice get by Leon Rose. So I like that quite a bit. Here he is. Here's the former Mavs legend I was talking about, Tim Hardaway Jr. wants a guy who gave me so much frustration. Wants a guy who enraged me at times. Now, I think he's one of the most underrated pickups of the offseason. Why is that? Well, he signs for a league minimum with the Denver Nuggets, where I think he's just going to be tremendous. I think he's going to fit like a glove. Obviously, I thought, he rehabbed his value quite a bit, I thought, in Detroit last year. The Mavericks, of course, had to give up assets to get off of that contract, even though it was expiring. And it's interesting with him was I was like, I was always open to trading him when he was on the Mavericks. My only thing was, hey guys, replacing volume 3-point shooting is not as easy as you think it is. And it is a skill set that's valuable. Even if it can be very frustrating, even if it can be very streaky, just having a guy who, I'll go out there and I'll shoot 8 threes a game. It doesn't matter. Like I'll throw him up there. Having that on your team and a guy that defenses do have to respect is really important for the team. And it's going to be really important for this Nuggets team. Having a guy like Tim who can shoot off the bench is going to be gigantic for them. They haven't really had something like this in a while, right? Like a knockdown 3-point shooter to come off the bench and play alongside Jokic. Obviously, you get good spot-up shooting. That goes without being said. It was always a really solid spot-up shooter with the Mavs. Again, even though sometimes it was streaky and frustrating, he always graded out as a good spot-up shooter. With Dallas, that's playing off of Luka Doncic's playmaking. Now imagine that off of Jokic's playmaking. And he is a guy, and it wasn't utilized that frequently in Dallas, but he is a guy who you can run off of screens, right? Did that a ton earlier in his career. Again, that's just not really how Dallas operates offensively, at least not as the Luka era sort of progressed. But he'll be doing that with the Nuggets, I'm assuming, and we'll probably have to cut a little bit more. Always kind of underwhelming to me as a cutter, but we'll have to do that a little bit more. Defensively, he has his warts, but I think this is a really solid pickup for the league minimum. Like, seriously, I think it's tremendous. I think it's an absolute steal. I think it's a home run value pick for the Nuggets, a value pickup, I guess I should say. And they've done such a good job of fleshing out their bench, right? Let's not forget Daron Holmes is coming back, hopefully at least. And then you have Valanciunas, who's just one of the better backup bigs in the league. And then you bring in Tim Hardaway Jr., and then you also bring back Bruce Brown. I mean, just a tremendous offseason for the Denver Nuggets, and I think this was one of the better moves right here. I think it was absolutely outstanding. So kudos to him. A couple of honorable mentions. I like the Day'Ron Sharpe extension, re-signing, I guess, for Brooklyn. Day'Ron Sharpe and Zaire Williams both signed at around $6 million. I think that's really good value for both of those guys. Day'Ron Sharpe is one of the better rebounding bigs in the league. He's not a starting caliber big at all, no, but a really solid backup big. Get him at $6 million is solid. And Zaire Williams, somebody who had that really impressive rookie season for the Grizzlies, a solidified role guy on a team that was in the playoffs, and then just kind of fell off and was really underwhelming the next 2 seasons, and then rehabbed his value quite a bit this past year in Brooklyn, kind of returned to form a little bit. Getting both those guys at $6 million a year, I think, is really solid value. What else do I have? The Wizards, so I don't know if I think Dylan Jones is a good player necessarily, right? He was somebody who a very, very smart team just drafted in the first round a year ago, a team that's hit pretty well on these later first-round picks, second-round picks in the Oklahoma City Thunder. So I really like the Wizards getting Dylan Jones for free, not only getting Dylan Jones, but also getting a second-round pick in the process just because the Thunder needed to create roster space. So I think this is a really smart decision by the Wizards. They were on my best moves when they just got Cam Whitmore for free, basically. And, again, I don't know if Dylan Jones will turn into anything at all. I think he was pretty underwhelming. And, in fact, I think the way that he looked at times, shape-wise, and let's just say not a good shape, was a little underwhelming for a rookie, right? But taking a risk on a guy who, again, a good team, not even a risk, I should say, but just taking a free flyer on a guy who a good team just drafted in the first round, and you're getting a second-round pick in the process, I really like that. Ty Jerome to the Grizzlies. This move just still one of the more shocking ones. I was just not expecting a move like this for him to, one, only go for what did it end up being, like $9 million a year, something like that. Was a little bit surprising to me. I think if he didn't have such a poor series against the Pacers, people say he had a terrible playoffs. He was pretty good against the Heat, but such a terrible series against the Pacers, maybe his value would have been a little bit higher, but I thought for sure he was a full mid-level guy. So the Grizzlies getting him at $8 million. And again, a little puzzling because you think about the Grizzlies and it's like, well, they got Scottie Pippen Jr. Do they really need another guard like this? But I like it quite a bit. they've had huge success with these guards and getting the most out of them. Obviously, with the thing about Scottie Pippen Jr. and Ty Jerome, yeah, he could play alongside Scottie Pippen, absolutely. Right? That's one of the things that's so appealing about Ty Jerome is he does have pretty solid size for a player of his sort of archetype, 6'5", 6'6", who really blossomed in a lot of ways last year. So I do like that, right? Some scoring punch off the bench for the Grizzlies. And also somebody, look, let's just call a spade a spade. If Ja Morant's out with an injury, yeah, Ty Jerome can slot in, I think. Yeah, why not? Duncan Robinson, I wanted to shout this one out because I didn't have it in here. It's an honorable mention for me. I've seen people shit all over this move, and I don't think it's that bad, honestly. I get being like, how the fuck did Duncan Robinson get $60 million a year again? Like, what happened there? Like, him at $18 million a year was like this albatross contract, and I was getting 16. Look, I mentioned it at the top. Well, I mentioned we talking about Tim Hardaway Jr. Volume three-point shooting is a valuable skill set. Even if it's frustrating, even if it's inconsistent, it's a valuable skill set to have. The Pistons have lost Tim Hardaway Jr. and maybe Malik Beasley. And they desperately need to replace that, and they replaced that with a really solid volume three-point shooter and somebody who's got some pretty good size. So I don't hate this move. In fact, it's so shitted on that I do think it's actually a little underrated. But my last move is Lonzo Ball, the Cleveland Cavaliers getting Lonzo Ball in a trade with the fucking Bulls for Isaac Okoro. I don't know what the fuck the Bulls are doing, right? And for the Cavs, kind of a no-brainer. Like, Okoro was already in this awkward spot where what's his role with this team moving forward? He's been disappointing for a guy who got selected as high as he did. Now we're paying him, and there were reports earlier in the summer that the Cavs are having a hard time even like trying to dump Isaac Okoro, and then they're able to go out and get Lonzo Ball. $10 million? Yeah, Lonzo Ball. Can you rely on the guy at all? I don't know, right? He hardly ever plays. How many games has he played in like the last 3 years total? I mean, isn't it like 30 or something crazy like that? I'm gonna pull it up right now. Yeah, over the last 3 seasons, he's played 35 games. And if you want to go the last 4 seasons, he's played 70. So, yeah, I mean, who knows really? But if you do get even like 80% of who Lonzo was at his peak with Chicago, and he plays consistently for you off the bench, you kind of monitor his minutes a little bit, this is a great pickup. I mean, a fantastic pickup for the Cavs, right? You get somebody who sort of buys into what you're trying to do defensively and could be a really valuable piece, especially considering some of those concerns that you've had defensively with your backcourt. Bringing in a guy like Lonzo, if he stays healthy, he's always one of the most impactful defenders in the NBA, and I think it's a fantastic pickup with not a lot of risk involved. Like, yeah, Lonzo, he could be hurt, but you didn't give up much. You're paying him $10 million. Like, Okoro was on his way out anyways. He was a black hole for you. You had to get off of that. So I think that's just a tremendous move. These are the type of moves teams like Cleveland have to make, where you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of trade assets. You got to make moves like this, where it's these calculated risks. Where, yeah, Lonzo could play 30 games over the next 2 years, and that's that. Or he could play, who knows? He could play 60 games next year, and return really solid value and be a guy who's playing 15, 20 minutes a game for us in the playoffs and really, really helping us out off the bench. Huge home run trade. Awesome. All right, those are my 5 most underrated moves. Tune in tomorrow for my 5 most overrated moves. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. I love you.